Thank you all for joining. Sorry for the little bit of the delay. We are delighted to have additional company here today, folks who are usually on the Zoom. Apologize for making them
Can
wait.
someone send Saran Zoom details?
Yep. Saran, need a link?
Yeah,
Okay.
can't seem to get it.
Okay, we'll get Saran in. And I see my co-chairs, Representative Bombach is here, and Senator Townsend, is he made it on? He is Senator Townsend, great. So thank you all, let's jump right in to roll call. Have you got it? It looks like we definitely have a quorum today.
Definitely.
So if it's permissible, we're not gonna do a round robin roll call just because you have done so. Do you wanna, you feel like you've got everybody? Do you wanna say their name real quickly out loud? Just in case somebody else has joined and we don't see you, she's gonna say.
Yep, so we do have a Lieutenant Governor here with us. We have David Craig. We have Secretary Geisenberger, Bill Oberly, Mike Legato down there, and then logging in virtually, I have Representative Bombach, Senator Townsend, Secretary DeMatteis, Senator Pettyjohn. We do have Wayne Emsley here in person as well, Jeff Tashner online, and Denise Allen online.
Great. Great. Appreciate that. So now that we have everyone here, Saran is here. If we can have then item number 2, approval of the June 5th meeting minutes. I got a first here, second. All in favor, no discussion, all in favor, signal by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? If not, the ayes have it, and thereby we have approved the June 5th minutes. Next, we're going to go right into some of the modeling impacts. So I'm going to turn over to Juliana. Do you want to start us off? Or
I think we're gonna start with Willis Howard Watson first.
Okay, Willis Howard Watson. And I want to make, again, a clear statement up front. I think I say it at the beginning of every meeting. This is truly a public forum. Thank you all who come along. We want to make sure time for public comment. We have created a special website. And again, at every meeting we have stated, we have heard from our retirees that they absolutely are not in favor of the current plan, why we are here, for themselves with Medicare Advantage. And so please take note that the modeling that has been done by this committee to date does not have modeling that forces Medicare Advantage on current retirees. So again, I want to make sure to mention that again, and that we will be having other modeling ideas. So we're going to start. These are just options that we have modeled. Other things may come along, and so we'll get started with Willis Howard Watson.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. So for the first segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the results of a request from a subcommittee member to hear a brief overview of some of the non-Medicare retiree medical plan options in the states that surround Delaware. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the findings that were publicly available on the different plan options, the premium contributions, as well as any age requirements for retiree medical eligibility for retired state employees and retired public education employees within these 3 surrounding states. So Carol, if I could ask you to please flip to slide 3. Great, thank you. So we'll start with Maryland. And again, this was a summary of information that was publicly available on each of the state health benefit websites or retiree pension websites. So specifically for Maryland, if we look at the plan options that are offered to non-Medicare retirees, for both retired state and school employees, they have the same medical plan options available as those that are offered to active employees. So you can see there's several PPO plans, 2 EPO plans or exclusive provider organization plans, and they function a lot like an HMO, except typically members don't require referrals to see specialists in an EPO plan. And then an HMO plan. So there's several options available to non-Medicare retirees for both school and state employees, retired employees, that is. In terms of medical premium contributions for both medical and prescription drug coverage, this will vary based on the length of service that someone has accrued within either the state employment or public school employment. There weren't immediate available details regarding the length of service requirements and sort of how that translated to the state subsidy, but it does appear to vary based on plan option and coverage tier. We've noted here the range of monthly premium contributions, again, for non-Medicare retirees who are eligible for the maximum state subsidy, which would require 25 years of creditable service within either the state or public school organization. And then in terms of age requirements, again, for Maryland, non-Medicare retirees are eligible for medical benefits if they're getting a monthly state retirement allowance and also are meeting certain criteria for years of creditable service. This includes retiring at normal retirement age with at least 25 years of creditable service. It also includes allowing retirees who left state service but deferred the retirement allowance with at least 10 years of creditable service and within 5 years of normal retirement age. For state employees, this is defined as reaching age 65 or some retirees who are in grandfather groups, which may be a little bit less than 65. So for instance, 62 years of age. Specifically for public school employees, for teachers, they qualify for normal retirement age when they reach age 65 and have at least 10 years of service, or their combined age and years of service equals at least 90. So in one example that was provided in the benefit booklets that were available online, you could have a teacher who reaches age 58 with 32 years of service who can then retire at quote unquote normal retirement age, and they would be eligible for their full pension. For retirees of Maryland state institutions of higher education, medical benefits eligibility is a little different. It includes leaving employment with an attained age of 57 years old and at least 10 years of creditable service. So again, we're kind of zeroing in on certain age requirements in the late 50s to early to mid 60s with 10 plus years of creditable service. Moving on to New Jersey, for both state employees and retired school employees, for non-Medicare retirees, they also get the same medical options that are offered to active employees. The particular plan options vary a bit based on whether you are a retired state employee or a retired school employee. But again, you do have the same options available to choose from as you did when you were in active service. When we look at the retiree premium contributions that various retiree groups are making, this again varies based on whether you're a state employee or a school employee. So for retired state employees, they pay a percentage of the total premium cost of the plan that they select. And that ranges anywhere between 3% and 35% of the total premium cost. And again, that's going to vary based on plan option and coverage tier. Now, specifically for unionized state employees who elect either the PPO or EPO plan options, those union retired state employees are only going to pay 1.5% to 7.5% of that retiree's annual retirement allowance. So this is not a percentage of the total cost of the plan. This is a percentage of the retiree's annual retirement payment or their pension payment that they're paying a percentage of to enroll in those PPO and EPO plans. It is capped at a maximum of just over $9,000 per year. And there are instances where some retirees that meet certain requirement date and years of service may not pay any contributions towards the cost of their medical coverage. And then specifically for retired school employees, they also pay a percentage of their annual retirement allowance. So again, looking at percentage of their annual their annual pension payment ranging anywhere from 1.7% to 7.2% with a maximum of about $9,000 a year. And in terms of any age requirements for retiree medical eligibility here, for non-Medicare retirees in New Jersey, they are eligible for medical benefits if they're receiving a state-administered retirement benefit. And they reach normal retirement age, which is going to range between 60 to 65 years old, depending on when that retiree enrolled in the state-administered retirement system. If we move to the next page, just to round us out, looking at Pennsylvania. So here again, non-Medicare retirees have the same medical plan options as those that were offered to active employees. And these options do vary depending on whether someone was a retired state employee or a retired school employee. If we look at the premium contributions associated with the different plan options, again, this is going to vary by plan and by coverage tier elected. So if somebody elects single coverage versus coverage for them and a spouse. For retired state employees, the amount that they pay is going to vary also depending on the retirement date. And again, is based on a percentage of the retiree's final average salary prior to retirement. So this is sort of looking retrospectively at what they were being paid prior to them retiring from active state service. And it's going to range from 1% to 3% of that person's final average salary, again, for non-Medicare eligible retirees. For, again, for non-Medicare, I'm sorry, is there a question?
No, somebody's probably either having cold or hot flashes in the room. I won't divulge who.
I think I'm in the middle of the wind tunnel here.
No question. It was just he was getting literally blown out of the room. All right.
Oh.
Your conversation is so enthusiastic and blown away. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. So again, for non-Medicare retirees, the PPO and the HMO options, again, this is for state employees, those are offered at no additional cost to the retiree. There may be an opportunity for retirees to purchase coverage under the other PPO option. So it's a buy-up available, but again, those specific contribution rates weren't available on the state's public benefits website. So it appears that for non-Medicare state retirees, they have a choice of plan options. Some they pay for if they want to choose that as a buy-up option. The other two are available at no cost. And then for retired school employees, the premiums for the PPO plan were readily available online, which we've noted here. Premiums for the HMO plan options are really going to vary based on where the person lives and the plan option selected, and there were a few to select from, but generally speaking, it appears that those HMO plan options are priced higher than the PPO plan option available to retired school employees. And then looking at the age requirements here, so if you're a retired state or school employee, you're eligible for non-Medicare medical benefits. If you are retired and enrolled in either the Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement System or the Pennsylvania Public School Employees Retirement System. Your eligibility for retiring under one of those systems does vary by the date that you enroll into the retirement system and your attained age. So it generally ranges from about 50 years old to 65 years old, depending upon the particular class of service that an employee may have fallen into. For eligibility to retire under the public school employees retirement system, you're generally eligible if you retire at or after age 62 with at least 15 years of credited service. For school employees specifically who were hired after July 1st of 2011, you must be at least age 65 with at least 15 years of credited service. So, you know, sort of cutting off the ability to retire as a pre-Medicare or non-Medicare retiree for any employees, any school employees who were hired on or after July 1st of 2011. So I know I walked through that rather quickly, but I'm certainly happy to take questions. If we just flip very quickly to slide 5, there really isn't any content here, but we did include some links to the specific websites where we pulled the information that's summarized in the 2 slides of charts that we just went through.
A little light reading. Thank you for that. Thank you. And I know Representative Bombach, our co-chair, will turn to you, sir.
Great, thank you. Jacqueline, so if I were to just get like cliff notes, what I see is that the 3 states, what I saw have minimum ages at which people would be eligible. The youngest age would be 57 for Maryland, 60 for New Jersey, and 50 for Pennsylvania. And I also see that all of them seem to have a premium share for all employees, but unlike Delaware, they all generally have a formula based on either final salary or level of pension. Is that a correct summary?
I think that that's a fair summary, especially for New Jersey and Pennsylvania. For Maryland specifically, I would say that's generally true, although again, it was a little bit difficult to sort of get at really more of the details around how that varies based on length of service.
Okay, thank you so much.
Are you gonna ask that question or not? If not, I will.
You two are live today. We don't have to have you lean into your desk.
No, right.
All right, go ahead.
Well, my concern is we're making these comparisons. Have we made any comparison in average salary or medium salary as well? Because this information doesn't mean anything to me if I don't know what the salaries are.
Yeah, and I'll go one further, if I might, Madam Chair.
Sure.
I believe at the last meeting was noted that the average state salary in Delaware was 50,000. I'd like to know what the median salary is in Delaware. That's more meaningful to me.
I don't know where our Secretary Kate and his team are there, but the question was, what's the median salary for Delaware employees? And then I hope you could hear that, Jacqueline, I don't know, we certainly did not assign you that task, but it's one that is worth asking, comparing, we're not comparing apples to apples per se, when you're looking at the salary base and requirements. And the question was if we knew any comparison with salary between the states. So those are things that I'm sure the unions like to have considered.
Most definitely.
Okay. And you don't have to respond because I see on your face you can't.
Well, and then the other thing.
It's okay to be honest. This is a work group. We're a work group, a task force. We're here to work and answer honestly.
Well, the
No,
other
and
thing
certainly-
Madam Chair.
It's Claire, I just want to say the average salary is 55,000.
Okay, thank you. Do you have the
Somewhere.
median there by chance?
I'll look through the last report we did to see
Yeah,
if we
if you have it. Yeah.
put it in the chat if we have it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
I assume that probably excludes overtime. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't either.
All right, the question was overtime.
And the other concern I had, and we're making comparisons and we're talking about negotiated increases. We're not talking about changing legislation to allow for negotiations of pensions now in making those comparisons.
And that would not be at this table, no. I mean, the recommendations
Okay.
we're gonna be making.
So
would
that we're not talking apples to apples.
Right,
It's all over the lot. So
Right.
again, it's great information, but the
Right.
question is what's it worth?
and I think Representative Bombach and others, when they asked to see, I think they were getting at competitiveness, and I think probably going a little bit outside the lane per se, but in the lane, because thinking not only about our retirement, but I think the question was about recruitment and other things, if there is more competitive, retirement, salary, those kinds of things, so. But good to have comparisons, I guess.
Yes,
All right,
thank you.
others, okay, who is up next on deck, since Faith has left us for a vacation? Is she on vacation? Do you think she's really vacationing? I don't know. She's working the whole time, she's emailing you, I figured that. And if Faith, if you are hiding under a false phone line, you need to go off the phone and be on vacation. I'm joking, she's not doing that, but go ahead. All right. Who's next?
I
Joanna,
believe I'm up.
yay,
Alright.
Joanna.
So Carol, I'd like to go to slide 4, please. So basically, the first few slides in this presentation are items that were reviewed at previous meetings. So looking in the top right corner, we talked about what meeting dates these different models were submitted and presented to the committee. What I'd like to notate on slide 4, in the previous meeting, there was some confusion as to whether this was modeled with $5,100 as the annual HRA payment or 49. And we just want to clarify that it was definitely $5,100, $5,100 that was used in the model.
So then we have some new models we'd like to share with the committee, moving to slide 5. And these are two similar options, but slightly different. So the very first one is offering a Medigap supplement plan similar to existing special Medic-Fill plan. So basically, right now, for anybody who was retired effective 1/1/2012 or after, they have to pay 5% of the cost share. So basically, the state pays 95%, the retiree pays 5%, assuming they have their 20 years of service. So we've done, as we've done historically with our previous models, we have a Model A, a Model B, and a Model C. So I'd just like to remind the committee, these, in no way do these models, as they've been costed out, impact current retirees. So Model A is for any current employee who was hired on or after January 1/2015. Model B is for those hired on or after 1/1/2025. And Model C is for employees who retire on or after January 1/2025. So with that said, increasing the retiree share from 5% to 10% for the special Medic-Fill plan, or plan similar to the special Medic-Fill plan, that does reduce the OPEB liability by approximately $1 billion for each of those scenarios. And it increases funding just shy of 1%. So we're looking at 0.6, 0.7%. So again, I just want to take the time to remind the committee that all of our baselines have assumed a 0.36% of employee or rate of payroll, right? The state's contributing 0.36% of active employee salaries towards this. So the net impact for this first option is roughly 0.6 or 0.7%. And then taking that same theory and looking at it, what if we increase the cost share so that the retiree pays 15% instead of the 5%? So again, for models A, B, and C, it would then double, right? So it reduces the liability by 2 million and some change. And then it increases our funding by roughly 1.5%. So are there any questions about this? So again, this is our special Medic-Fill plan that we have today. This is a Medigap plan very similar to that.
Okay.
Joanna, could you please, as a footnote on this page, could you identify specifically the difference between the Medigap supplement plan and how that would differ from the special Medic-Fill? I think that's the.
Well, it's really just, it's terminology. So our current Medic-Fill plan is a Medigap plan.
I think the problem is the word similar to.
But I'd have to defer to statewide benefits, but we refer to as our current Medigap plan as a special Medic-Fill. So that's just the name that the state of Delaware is using, I believe.
Well, it's trademarked by Highmark,
Yeah.
so,
Correct.
yeah, I think, if I might, Wayne.
Yeah, and we'll have Wayne and then we'll go to Jeff, who's had a stand up, and I think our secretary Mattias had unmuted as well.
You know,
So we'll go to you.
The question
Sir.
for me is, moving forward, if we're going to look at a Medigap plan, I think there needs to be some assurance. It's exactly what the Medic-Fill plan currently provides, or is even better. That would be my concern. So,
I think my understanding, and I'll let Claire change this, but actuarially, what they assumed was no change in the plan.
okay,
But you're correct that it's branded as Medic-Fill by Highmark, and obviously you can't guarantee that it'll be Highmark going forward. It could be anybody doing this. So actuarially, they just assume the same plan.
Alright.
So,
So we have that.
um,
And then we'll
and
go.
that's why, frankly, you don't see a huge change in the funded ratio, because you really haven't made any design changes at
Right.
all. You
Yeah,
made a small change in terms of the employee, the retiree contribution.
Okay, then.
Okay, wait, gentlemen, we have other people. I have to pull the little protocol here, so everybody gets to speak fairly, sorry.
But I haven't gotten an answer to my question.
Okay, and
My
we'll go.
original statement was, can we footnote the fact that,
Yeah.
that what the difference is? If there is no difference, then can we put a footnote there as to why
Yeah.
it says special Medigap supplement plan and then special medical plan. I mean, you just want to make note about the fact of the
Well, I think,
copyright. whatever.
yeah, it just, I mean, we
It
kind of
just-
are saying that, we're saying similar to existing, we just didn't say exactly like.
Right. So in future printing, we may go, if we do this future modeling, we could put a footnote.
Those words have a bad history, and that's what I'm trying to get clarified.
We want good history.
I know
I
you-
want
I
that.
do think we need to recognize that over the next 30, 40, 50 years, Medigap will change. Because Medicare changes their regulations every single year.
Sure.
So you can't say it's exactly forever for the next 30 years. It's going to be the premium plan as close to whatever the premium plan Medicare allows. But if Medicare makes regulatory changes, there's gonna be changes.
Right, absolutely.
No question.
So going to those who have been patiently waiting, we have Jeff Kashner, I think Secretary Dematteis may have wanted to comment and she's changed. And then we'll go to Ms. Allen. So Mr. Kashner.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. You sure have your hands full down there today.
I
That's,
do, I love
obvious
it. And I
already.
didn't even bring coffee.
They asked me to show up in person today, so.
Joanna, the question I have is, under this scenario, am I correct that the state is remaining a self-insured plan? And this is not what would be a state-developed or state-directed plan where we would put out to private carriers a bid for Medigap supplement coverage. This is remaining a self-insured plan.
I will defer that question to Margaret Temkin, our actuary.
Or Secretary Dematteis also unmuted. Secretary Dematteis.
I don't think there is a fully insured Medicare supplement plan. They're all, I don't think that even exists, Jeff.
Well, and that's one of the questions that we've been asking, and I haven't gotten a clear indication on. Are we able, I know historically, we have bid the administration of the Medigap supplement plan, but we're still self-insured, we're paying the claims. Is there the ability for the state to bid the 20%, the supplemental coverage that we need for this population that's not covered by the Medicare program?
And I don't know if there's anyone here who can answer, Secretary, if you can, or were you calling?
I've asked that question several times, and Willis Towers Watson, your point is, it certainly doesn't, well, I won't speak for you, Willis Towers Watson, why don't you answer the question?
And the reason I ask is because when someone goes out on the marketplace and buys supplemental coverage, they're buying coverage for the 20% not covered by Medicare.
Right.
And one of the things that I think a number of us have been curious about and asking, does the state have that ability to do that for them as a planned population? Or is the only way that can occur is individuals making that purchase for him or herself?
We gotta get the answer to that, since we don't have anyone jumping to answer. That is a question that we can come back to perhaps. So with that, with the
And I
footnote,
would be extremely interested, because if we are able to do that and, you know, close off our exposure to all the claims, that has to have some impact on the state in terms of the OPEB liability, the funding ratio, et
No.
cetera.
I've
So,
asked
Yeah,
this
this is fine.
question. Jacqueline, you want to speak up on it? I've asked this very question, and the answer is it actually wouldn't help the state at all in reducing the OPEB liability. Does the Willis Towers Watson team want to take this on, or do you want to?
Jeff, can you state the question again in terms of?
sure, Brian, the question I have is, is there the ability for the state to bid supplemental coverage for the population as a whole?
On a fully insured basis?
Well, on a fully insured basis because we're talking about the 20% not covered by Medicare, correct?
Basically, I mean, it's.
Yeah, on a fully
That's
insured
that, but
basis.
Yeah,
Because when I go out as an individual and purchase it in the marketplace, I'm purchasing coverage for the 20% not covered by my Medicare coverage, correct?
well, you're purchasing coverage for the 20% on the part B, the Part B
Yeah,
deductible.
I mean, is there the
Are they
ability for the
co-insurance?
state to purchase that coverage for the population as a whole?
Sure, you can purchase any designed program you want as a group product on a fully insured basis, but it's not going to Secretary DeMatteis's point, it's not going to save the state money. You know, that gap coverage and trends in the Medicare space are low. We remember when Chris was talking about the trend experience, usually, you know, it's following Medicare reimbursement, so trends only around 3%. So volatility is not really a big issue here with this population. And anytime you go from self-funded to fully insured, maybe from year to year, experience might be a little bit different, but generally you're going to lose because you're paying premium taxes, risk charges, margins, profit. So long-term, you're always going to be worse off fully insured than self-funded. But long-winded way of saying, yes, you could design a supplement program that you could market on a fully insured basis.
Answer the question. Miss Allen, I think you've been waiting patiently. Oh,
So, and I think it was covered. I'm going back to Wayne. And I would like it clarified that we need to make sure that when we say similar, we need to make sure that if it's the same, the Medigap and the Medic-Fill, because what happens is the retirees see similar and they think it's going to be exactly or very close to the same. So we need to make sure we clarify all that so we don't get.
Let's be clear, Denise, you're never going to have the same as Medic-Fill. It's never going to be able to be the same. Medic-Fill is specifically designed by Highmark.
And
When we put it out to bid, you don't know what you get back, and Medicare changes Medigap coverage. So we can't stand here and say it will be the same. It will be similar to what's available in the marketplace, but we cannot promise and should be very clear that it cannot be the same.
Okay.
Based on Medicare, not based on the state of Delaware.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
So I did hear that, and I just want to make sure we keep it clarified so we don't get misled like we were before. That's all I wanted to say. I didn't need to have that. Thank you.
All right, now Margaret had her hand up in our co-chair, Representative Bombach. Margaret, did you want to add anything to that conversation?
Yes, as Secretary Geisberger had said, that this is run exactly the same assumptions as the previous results. So if it's just written there that it says it's similar to, we could just get rid of all the similar to and just say they're going to be charged 10% for the Medicare supplement plan.
Well, I think what they're asking is maybe just we can put a footnote that says modeled based on the current Medic-Fill plan.
Right.
Thank you.
And I think that's what Wayne was wanting clarity, so folks knew that. Representative Bombach?
I think what was just said is exactly what I was going to say. Thank you.
Oh, good, we're getting kumbaya. Yeah. Let's keep the kumbaya coming, and we have more, seriously, a lot. Don't panic, folks. We know we've got several more meetings. We got a lot of work to do. We may have to add a meeting, so I know it's taken a little bit of time, but we are gonna get there, so we have a lot of choice with modeling. I know I'm gonna give Joanna a little more work today. Here we are with Dave and I. So keep going.
All right. So, moving on to the next slide. Again, we have been asked to show a different option, and one is offer a Medicare Advantage plan based on, I'm not gonna say similar, I'm gonna go ahead and change the wording right now. Based on the formerly proposed Highmark Delaware Freedom Blue PPO. So again, that's assuming the same 5% cost share that's in place today. And again, want to reiterate, does not impact current retirees because we're using the same consistent modeling with A, B, and C based on either higher date or future retirement date. This one, as you can see, has a pretty significant impact. It reduces the liability between roughly 7% to 7 billion to 9.5 billion, depending on the model. And then it overall helps the funding by 5% to almost 8%. So again, this is strictly offering a Medicare Advantage plan for future retirees depending on hire date or retirement date. And they would continue to pay the 5% cost share as we know it today.
So have you combined page 5 and 6 together? So there's an option.
Funny you should say that.
Okay.
Future slide.
You sound like somebody who's done this before.
Representative Bombach.
I just want to thank you for including this. I think I actually requested this. I should have led with, really appreciate the baseline being present in these slides so we can see the incremental impact of each of the options we're looking at. Again, thank you for having this out there so there's a subcommittee during discussion, we can discuss it further. Thank you.
Okay, take it. Keep going, Joanna.
All right, no further questions. Moving to slide 7. We're gonna take a little bit of a detour and then I'll come back to Dave's question. This is another funding option. The question was posed previously. What if we increase the funding rate of payroll from the current 0.36% to 1%? So in this particular case, it would reduce the liability by $1 billion and certainly increase our funding by 7.5%, 7.7%. So again, the more money we put into OPEB, it's always going to reduce the liability and increase the funding status. Any questions about this particular slide?
Just on this particular slide for members of the committee, just so you have a sense, the 0.36% of payroll comes to about $8.5 million a year. So if you're bumping it up to 1%, you're talking about maybe $21 million a year, something like that. In comparison to the 1% of the budget, that number is 51 million. So
Right.
you
And
can,
that's full total.
you can increase the payroll contribution, but you know, it pales in comparison, increasing it by the percentage of the budget.
Okay. Now, moving to slide 8. This one is offering a choice between the Medigap supplement or the Medicare Advantage. And again, this is saying that retirees would have a choice. It does not, as modeled, does not impact current retirees. And it basically is saying that the cost share would be increased for the retirees. They would pay for the Medicare supplement, the retirees would pay 15%, the state would pay the other 85%. And for the MA plan, the state share would remain at 95%, so the retiree would pay 5%. So basically, the retiree would choose to have the Medicare Advantage at 5% or the Medigap plan at 15%. And this was just modeled for, excuse me, retirement dates on or after 1/1/2025. And we made the assumption that 90% of retirees would enroll in the Medigap plan, paying the 15% versus the Medicare Advantage plan. So with that said, the results say that the reliability would be reduced, the OPEB liability would be reduced by 3.6 billion, and it would have a funding impact of 2.2%.
Go ahead.
This assumes no changes in eligibility, correct?
That is correct. It's based on everything as we know it today.
Right. We all heard that. He said this was just a funding side, not the eligibility side, but. Okay, keep going.
All right. And then we have another eligibility and plan design option. So this is offering, again, a choice where the cost structure is a little different. So we're still offering a choice between a Medigap plan or a Medicare Advantage plan, but it would all be based on your age and your age. So let me go into explain. This one's a little more tricky. So any current and again, this affects future retirement dates, right? So today, any retiree who retires after July 1, 2012 and are 65 years old enrolled in our Medicaid plan they pay 5%, state pays 95%. So for any future retirees that would retire on or after January 1 of 2025 and are at least 60 years old at retirement, they would pay the 5%, and when they become Medicare eligible, they would pay the 5% cost share that we have today, plus an additional 25% if they choose the Medigap plan. So if I retire at age 60, when I become Medicare eligible, I will have a choice to enroll in the Medicare Advantage plan, pay the 5% cost share, or I can enroll in the special or in the Medigap plan, pay my 5% plus another 25% of the premium to have the Medigap plan. So this is tiered. So the younger I am at retirement, the more I pay if I select the Medigap plan when I become Medicare eligible. So just kind of moving to the last bullet, if I retired on or after January 1, 2025, and I had less than 50 years of service, in this particular case, I'm gonna have to pay 100% of the premium for Medigap. Otherwise, I could just pay 5% for the Medicare Advantage. So again, Medicare Advantage is available to all retirees with a 5% cost share. All the others, the Medigap plan is based on your age at retirement.
And Joanna, this is Claire, just to clarify that this modeling grandfathers retirees who retired before 1/1/25. So they would get the Medigap coverage at no cost, additional cost if they choose it.
That is correct. We only did this option as Model C. So it's a retirement date on or after 1/1/2025. And then the
Does not impact current retirees or anybody who retires before 1/1/25.
you're absolutely correct. So when we cost that out, it's a $6.9 billion liability reduction, which results in a 5% increased funding.
Great. Representative Bamba?
Yes, thank you. Joanne, by the way, I think you misstated that last bullet. You said with 50 years of service, it's actually 50 years of age.
Oh, sorry.
We're not letting anybody leave.
But
We have a handful of employees that still have 50 years or more of service.
What has it, I think it's correct. Oh, go ahead.
But more importantly, I wanted to point out that, I mean, if we use our Wayback Machine back in September, we were hearing, and that was a different world, but I'm still going to say back in September, we were hearing retirees saying, hey, fine, you offer Medicare Advantage, but let me pay the difference and be able to keep my Medic-Fill. This is not that, because this changes nothing for current retirees, but this is something that says for people who are 15 or more years from retirement, whatever that last bullet is, yes, they would pay the difference. They get Medicare Advantage for the same, which is 5%. Or again, for that, notably in the future cohort, they would pay the difference if they wanted to keep the Medic-Fill-ish plan. Is that accurate, Joanne?
That is correct.
Thank you.
There's one other bullet, Joanna, that I think is not on here that needs to be covered because it's going to get at the concerns legitimately expressed in previous meetings that this could impact people rushing to retire. And so there was another bullet that we discussed, and that is that if you are 60 years or 65 years old and have more than 20 years of state service and you retire after 1/1/25, you would never pay more than the 5% you would be required to pay plus the 25%. It would never escalate to 50 or 75 if you are 65 years old and have at least 20 years of state service.
Secretary Mass, I just want to correct 60 years, right? Because if they're already 65, then that's not.
Right. Yep, my mistake. 60 years old and 20 years of service. We would grandfather them in under this model to never pay more than the additional 25%.
Great. And Secretary, and I don't know what Representative Secretary.
So one of the things that's not modeled here, because we don't do this sort of modeling, but I want to raise it as an issue, perhaps to the positive, perhaps to the negative, depending on how you view the world. But we're not doing any what's called dynamic forecasting here. Dynamic forecasting is when you assume behavioral changes, and therefore you say the forecast is going to be this because we expect this type of behavioral change. There's no dynamic forecasting in here in this forecast. However, it is probably safe to assume that this, you know, would impact how people think about, hey, maybe I'll put in an extra year or two. Maybe I'll, you know, because I really want that that meta gap program, and therefore, in order to not have this 25%. I mean, it's the same dynamic that goes into how people think about, again, this has nothing to do with the pensions, but we do have early retirement in the pensions. And people think about, well, do I want to leave a year early or a year and a half early and have that you know, the reduction in my pension? So my guess is that the actual impact of this could be, you know, could help to address the pre-Medicare issue that we've talked about, which is the people who leave from age 48 to 65 and you're covering them for 17 years. It might cause some of those people to say, you know, some of them may say, I'm perfectly happy with the Medicare plan. You know, but others may say, well, to really get to that, you know, Medigap thing, I'm gonna stay a little longer. So it probably does have those dynamic impacts, but it's impossible to forecast it. So my point is just probably better from a funding ratio perspective. We just can't forecast it.
Representative, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out again, and I hate to be parochial, but I just want to put on the record that you could have a trooper retiring as young as 42. So, you know, you leave them in a precarious position from a healthcare perspective, and I think COAD factors into that as well. So I want to keep that at the
Right,
forefront.
the
as
safety
we move forward.
officers have to be included when they say safety, correction, and law enforcement.
Correct.
They have a unique carve out.
Indeed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We need to carve out for that.
They would have to have a unique carve out. That is a
Okay.
given. Have I frozen you again? I had her turn that on.
It's a little chilly.
I would
but
say
turn it off now.
I would
No,
say
it's fine.
I would say it differently, which is that we need to discuss it and figure it out. I wouldn't say there's an absolute carve out.
Well, I-
42 is very young.
You want to make a bet?
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to Wayne, whose hand's up. Go ahead, Wayne.
Twin, if we look at the second
Oh,
bullet,
sorry.
the person who retires after 21 or 125 and is, let's say they're 60 years old.
Mhm.
When they become Medicare eligible, they'll pay the 5% that they would have paid anyway, plus an additional 25. What are they paying? What will they pay between the time they're 60 and 64 and 11 months?
You mean, oh, for their current insurance during that, between
Yeah,
that
assuming
period?
now that
So they would pay whatever they pay now as an active employee based on this option.
It's a
Okay,
similar
what-
average
what if-
fee.
Okay, what I would like to see model would be, what if that person who, when they retire at age 60, let's say, they would pay the 5% plus the 25 for whatever coverage that they had during that period. In other words, if you're working for the state's going to pay 25, it's 25%. If you stop working, then you need to pay that. So you're not going to pay 5%, you're going to pay 30. I think, because when I look at the cost of retiree healthcare, it's actually higher during the pre-Medicare years than it is the Medicare years. So I think it actually would have a greater impact on the liability. But I'd like to see the numbers.
Well, so that's actually a really good segue into the next slide, unless anyone else has any questions. Charles.
Just have a follow-up. And I agree with Secretary Geisenberger's other comments about the dynamics changing, and if you were to impose something like this. But, and I had mentioned several meetings ago that, and it may be a minimal impact, but there would be, in fact, a cost shift potentially to the pension fund if people delay retiring and therefore receive higher pensions. I don't know what that impact might be. It might be minimal, but
I think because of the way we fund the pension fund, and I'll let the two pension administrators correct this, but because we fully fund the pension fund at 100% of the actual required contribution, I don't think we create an issue for the pension fund.
Right,
Yeah,
Because it's
that would be
100%.
my thought.
Okay,
because they're as employees, they're contributing longer to the pension fund.
correct,
That's longer time for us to invest and have return.
gotcha.
Those
Okay.
And you're not paying out benefits for the 1 or 2 years.
In other, they
Yeah.
sort of offset each other.
Gotcha, okay.
It has impacts, but
That makes
they'll should
sense,
be
yeah.
offset.
Okay, moving to slide 10. This is where I wish I was a magician and I could tell you what the best options are. But really what we want to get to is we've modeled over the last 3 meetings, individual options, right? We know there's pros and cons with each one. None of them are ideal for every population. However, we really need to start coming up with groups of options to model. So what we've done is we've taken the opportunity to give an example to the committee of what we mean and when we say we want to combine options.
And this is an example only
Yes,
for
that's
anybody
what I
listening.
would say,
in.
it's
This
for
is not voted on.
illustrative purposes only. The numbers are accurate, but the options are for illustrative purposes only. So this is what we as a, well, I'm not part of the committee, what you as the committee should be working towards, so we can get models of that. But it's also something, there can be some discussion afterwards, I think, things that will become obvious as I go through it. So again, starting with baseline, we know just contributing 0.36% of payroll at this point in time will increase our funding by 17.8%. So on top of that, if we continued to
Can
contribute,
I correct that? Sorry.
yes,
It will increase it to 17.8.
oh yeah, sorry,
From the
7.2,
levels it's already at,
thank you.
which is about 6.5, so.
So adding the additional 1% funding, so we're assuming, again, this is that carve out that we've talked about before. Assuming an eligibility change, so for this particular example, again, for illustrative purposes only, reducing spousal state share subsidy to 50% for spouses when retirement date is on or after January 1 of 2025, and offering a Medigap plan similar or modeled after the current special Medicaid plan. So again, it's model safe, so it affects those that retire on or after January 1 of 2025. And we would increase the pensioner share for this Medigap plan to 10%, from 5% to 10%. So all 3 of those combined on top, in conjunction with the baseline, it would reduce our OPEB liability by $11.9 billion. And what that would do would take our funding ratio to 64.1%. So just combining these 3 models have an impact of 46.3%.
And I think that's the area, we need to get to look at what are different options, because it's gonna have to be funding and eligibility design. I think that's something everybody's talked about. It's gonna take that, and it's good to have those. People, thoughts, comments from folks?
I have a
Go
question.
ahead. Go ahead.
It may just be the verbiage in terms of plan design, but it goes back to Jeff Hafner's earlier question. It's something I've wrestled with. How do you move forward mechanically? It says offer a Medicare supplement plan. In my mind, that suggests the state will offer a Medigap plan. And I think Jeff really was trying to get to that question earlier. It's certainly different than an HRA and go out into the marketplace and buy a Medigap plan.
Yeah,
So
so this is assuming a Medigap plan modeled after what we have today. It basically just increases the cost share that the retiree pays.
no, I understand that, but this would be a plan offered by the state that will be bid and offered by the state.
Yes, just exactly like we do business today.
Okay.
Right, and I think that's a clarification. Denise Allen. Denise, you gotta unmute.
Sorry, I had to switch that. So I just want to make sure I understand, when you say spousal state share, does that mean if one spouse is a retiree from the state and the other isn't, their spouse is not a state employee or retired, or is that like double state share? Is that what, if
No,
both
it,
spouses?
yeah, it is not double state share. This, because if you look at the free Medicare options, you have an individual coverage or like the retiree coverage, and then you have retiree and spouse, retiree and children, or family coverage. So this would basically increase the cost that the member would pay for retiree and spouse coverage or family coverage.
Okay, have we put in there anything about double state share?
Not at this point. I mean, that would be the SEBC level, and we are not touching
Okay.
that. I mean, current retirees are all grandfathered, kind of where I started. The plans that have all been here for current retirees grandfathered. And that again, wouldn't be for us, but thank you for asking.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Yeah, other comments? Oh, go ahead.
If I can just make a
Secretary
comment to
Geisberg.
those probably listening online. Just a review, when we talked about eligibility, we really looked at 3 major things that could move the needle and then one that doesn't move the needle a lot. The 3 things we're looking at: spousal state share, looking at, again, this is only for, just to be clear, only for active employees, future hires, not people who are already retired. What was looking at spousal state share, or raising the current eligibility of 15 years for 50%, 17 and a half years for 75%, 20 years for 100%, to 20, 25, and 30 years. And then the third thing we looked at was having a retirement age at which you wouldn't change your pension at all. You can retire whenever you want under the, under the current pension rules, but the healthcare eligibility would kick in at 50, with a carve out for public safety, but 55 or 60 basically. So those were the 3 big things. All 3 of those move the needle in similar ways. I don't think anybody would propose doing all 3, but choosing one of those 3. This was for modeling purposes. I don't know who chose to do this one, but
We just arbitrary,
Yeah.
there was like no,
But for people listening
No
online,
logic,
any
just
one of those 3
arbitrary.
eligibility changes have somewhat similar impacts.
yeah,
in terms of their-
they impacted
Excellent.
roughly between 1 to 3%,
So
1 to 3%.
1 to 3.
Not a lot. Denise, did you have something else to say, or you just had your hand waved from before? No, okay. All right. Well, getting
Madam
to,
Chair,
yes,
just as for informational purposes, if this hired after 1/1/2025,
For the slide 10,
retired.
it's for
after 1/1/20
retired.
Retired. Do we know the number of people that would impact if it would have happened July 1st of this year?
I'm not sure that I'm understanding.
How many?
how many
state-
state employees?
How many state employees will this impact
How many are left?
that are left
Yeah.
that would be retiring after 2025?
Large
Right.
percentage.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
I'm sure a significant percent. I sure hope they're
Well,
not all running away.
I think the answer is that there's around 14,000 state employees and
So that's the
16,000
answer.
16,000 teachers.
14,000.
However, again, for actuarial purposes, when you're looking out at these forecasted years, you're looking at all future hires.
I'm
as
not
well.
looking, I'm talking about if it were to
Yeah, it
happen
happened
today.
today.
You're saying about
Analysis.
14,000.
No, that's not what he's saying. So I don't understand what your question is.
I do. I think his question is, how many employees are not going to be retiring before, or who's not going to be retired, basically? How many and what implications there would be there? That's his thing. He's thinking about his current employee.
Well, I mean, payroll's around
You
14,000.
know who's on the payroll, you know
Yeah.
when they're eligible for retirement.
Yeah.
well, there's a lot, there's
And you
probably.
do the actuarial.
Yeah.
How many people do you think are
There's
retired?
like, I
You
would
have to have
say
a number.
30% of state employees are eligible to retire within the next 5 years, right? So probably any given time, you have 15 to 20% of your workforce that's eligible to retire right now.
So I think what he's thinking, will that
And
encourage
that's the
people
15,
to
the
retire?
15,000, you just
Well,
do 14.
Yeah.
But most of them are not eligible to retire on that.
So for those who are
Not
online,
even
who cannot
close to
hear.
retiring.
After
we'll-
2025.
All right. All right,
But those are people that might have just started a year ago.
I realize that.
Okay.
sorry, we're having a little discussion, apologize. Didn't miss anything, they were just looking at years and eligibility and who would be eligible to retire, if you could not hear online. Representative Bombach?
Yes, Joanne, under the additional assumptions detail column, under the second bullet, do you mean with less than 20 years of state service at the time of retirement?
No, they would need to have 20 years of service in order to only have to pay the 10% of state
So if
share.
they had 19, what would their payment be?
Based on the current structure, they would pay an additional 25%.
But that would be unchanged, is that correct? So this
Based
is,
on this model, yes.
this model is if they have 20 to 24.99, they'd pay 10%. That's the change
Well,
that is.
it's 20 years plus.
Okay, I'm sorry, 20 or more. And if it's okay, I'm sorry, if it's less than that, it already is stated that it's 25%, correct?
Well, it really depends on the years of service and their date of hire. So it could be anywhere between 50%, 25%. It's based on their date of hire, their years of service. It's a combination.
So I'm sorry, maybe it would be clearer if it was 20 plus, is that what you're saying?
We're making the assumption based on this model that the retiree would have 20 years of service at retirement.
Okay, so again, it's 20 plus.
Correct. At least 20, yes.
All right, so we had that. David and I had a chance to touch base last week. We had an aha that we know is not perfect, but an option we shared briefly, a conversation with each other. He is certainly more of a pension expert, but what we learned at the last meeting I did with my co-chairs, Representative Bombach and Townsend, I think we were all like taking a sigh when we realized there was not that cumulative impact that we thought. So we were brainstorming with the co-chairs, David and some others, on looking at the structure of the state funding rate and taking a look at asking you to model. Don't fall out of your chair.
Bring in my pen, Ray.
I'll give you a piece of paper and he can fill it in. But really looking at modeling, and again, we know it's not going to be full funding because I have been a legislator, you've been a legislator, we've all been, we know it's not going to get full, but if we could model full funding with a liability, either at a 10-year period, a 20-year period, taking that rate of payroll from the 0.36, and don't fall to your chair, and Dave can back me up here because I'll stop talking in a second, to 1% a year up using maybe up to a 10-year period using the OPEB side, which again, I recognize is different because it depends on different fees and funding, your transportation trust, your school fees, your ASF, knowing that not everybody is gonna go full ASF. But if we could look at that, because then you're looking at your funding side for your liability. So it's kind of like what you do with the pension, but you're doing it with the PRI. This is not PRI, and this is OPEB, and it's the state. And again, I know that means, like Rick was saying earlier, a significant amount earmarked in addition to, so separate from the 47 million that you have right now with the governor in there. So we could at least model it and we can come back and see. And then we may come back and be like, we need to do design and eligibility. I'm going to stop because Dave is the more accountant, pensioner language guy.
Yes.
Dave, go ahead, you do it.
So what we were thinking about was with the 0.36. So if you go to page 10, so this kind of summarizes what I was thinking about. So the baseline is 0.36. If you were to increase that each year, now in some discussions with the experts on ASF, I know there's an issue with ASF trying to generate ASF revenue to cover these expenses. So, but my thought was you have, the Transportation Trust Fund, other agencies that are not participating with their ASF funds to solve this problem. So it would be a good avenue to get some more revenue, but you have negative issues.
David, can you please define ASF for the public?
Yeah, there's different examples in state government. For example, the pension office is 100% ASF paid from the pension fund. So there's not general funds going to pay their expenses.
So if I can add, I mean, I have no problem with the idea of taking it from 0.36 to 1. I mean,
And just model it. I think let's
I
model
think
it
we've
out.
talked about what that means. It probably means an extra, what, maybe 12, 13 million dollars
In the
a
budget,
year,
right?
coming out of the budget. And my guess is that, I mean, my guess is it can be done. The problem is if we try to do a model where we say, let's fully fund this through a percentage of payroll, because we know that actuarially that would require that number not to be 0.36% or even 1%, but something like, I think 18% is what we came up with in the Retirement Benefit Study Committee. And if you did that, you would have a lot of state agencies that rely on fee revenue that wouldn't be able to cover that out of that fee revenue. So all those agencies like DENREC and others would say, oh my gosh, now my payroll costs have gone up 18%. I don't have the money to cover it. So I don't know that that same would happen between 0.36 and 1. But if you said, let's take it to 2, 3, 4, 10, at some point, it just, for those ASF agencies, they're just not gonna have the revenue.
Right, and I mean, again, I think just at least to model, because if I'm sitting here really looking to the future, like the plan and eligibility isn't enough, and it's great to have the 1%, it's great to have the 47 million, but at least if we could model this, and then we can come back and say, maybe we can go to over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or no, that was not a great idea. But if we have up to it, we can see, what it would be, and then in combination with the plan design, I'm feeling that it at least gives us another thing to consider to really get at the liability, right,
Right,
Dave? I
yeah.
mean, that's what we're looking
So-
at, really getting at the liability.
Yeah, the other thoughts I had was not to do anything with eligibility because they all have minimal impact in the long run, but concentrate on plan design similar to what they've done on page 8, where you give the retirees an option. They have to pay, keep the Medigap.
For future retirees.
Future retirees, or it would be zero, pay a smaller amount for whatever the other option is. So, that's kind of what I was thinking. So I'm glad to see this modeling this time. Just tweak it a little bit, like the 15% I think they use on page 8. You could go higher than that, and that might make the choices a little bit different. Less people would take the Medigap coverage.
Right. But I think at least having that model, like you said, I know Secretary Geisenberger, he does raise important points, about ASF, but there are federal funds or salaries. So for the person listening, it's salaries coming from, and it's still the state commitment. It's not like pre-fund, so the bond rating agency shouldn't be concerned either because it's not mandated. So again, because we want to make sure whatever we do, we're keeping our bonding. But it's, I think, worth maybe modeling a little bit of it.
Thank
you. Do you hate me?
No, not at all. And I think that's, we could go to slide 10, please. I think that's, the point is, we've come up with a very basic model for illustrative purposes only, but based on these 3 options, it still only takes us to 64% funded.
In 30 years.
Yes.
One thing about this that I do think before, whatever we do as we start to look at these combinations, is to show both what the immediate impact is on the OPEB liability, or at least as of 1/1/2025, and then what is achieved over a lengthy period of time, because some of these things have immediate impacts, a lot of them do not. So, they're bending the curve of what's supposed to grow to a $23 billion liability over unfunded liability over 20 years and 33 billion over 30 years, but they're not, it's still growing pretty consistently. Whereas some of these other options have more immediate impacts. In terms of what it means to budget ratio.
And again, this committee, I'm very mindful, we're part of Senate Bill 29, and I know there's a blurring of the lines. I mean, because again, we are here to address retiree health and liability. I recognize if we come forward with such recommendations that, Dave and I asked to model, that there are many other steps in the process, and we've got our SEBC who ultimately has this, we are coming up with recommendations. But wouldn't it be great to be able to turn over timely in August, September, a report at least where we give to our members of the General Assembly and our governor and his team, a couple of really solid scenarios that they can work from. That's our goal. And hopefully we have enough time. We may have to add a meeting in, hopefully not, but we can get there. All right, keep moving along then, I guess.
Representative Bombeck.
Oh, Representative Bombeck.
Yeah, so Secretary Geisenberger pointed out the benefit of seeing the impact of these changes in 2025. I don't believe we've ever been presented with that as a column in any of these tables. Is that data that is obtainable and shareable with the subcommittee?
I'll turn it to Margaret. I know we were able to get that for the Retirement Benefit Study Committee, so.
Yes, we can get that. Some of these, keep it in mind, depending on if it's model A, B, or C, they may not have an immediate impact. So the focus has always been on long term, but yeah, the information can be available.
And I would throw out there, I mean, there's no problem if the impact in 2025 is zero, but if we're asked to be considering that, I think we need that data item for every option we're looking at. And if it's an incomplete data set, I don't find it helpful. So I would encourage, if that's possible, to have it for every option that we're being asked to consider. And zeros are fine.
All right, moving along.
Okay, yes. I have confirmation that information is available, so we can work on having that updated for the next meeting.
All right, so meetings, or have we missed anything from anyone? Yes,
I
Representative.
had a quick question. I know several meetings ago, I believe we voted on having 1% of the prior budget
Yes,
dedicated, and I see Senate Bill 175 has been introduced. Is that part of this process? Or
Yes.
is that, okay.
it's been a part of our recommendation all along. And Representative Bombach, do you want to share where the status of the legislation is, sir?
Sure, I believe that was voted upon as a recommendation by the subcommittee, maybe at the last April meeting. And so Senator Townsend, Representative Ramon, Senator we'll get there, Pettyjohn, and I, and certainly the cabinet secretaries have helped us get that legislation together. It's already passed the Senate. It's in the House Administration Committee. I would expect it to be voted upon by the House on Thursday or Friday. Which is well in advance of the next governor's recommended budget. So yeah, it's well on course, on its way, and it sprung from, well, frankly, it sprung from the governor having started that with the current fiscal year, recommended in the next fiscal year, but also by the actions of our subcommittee here.
If I can add I expect it will pass, but if it didn't, the budget includes it, as did the appropriation is in the one-time bill, supplemental bill, and the mechanism for it is in the is also in the budget. So it's already passed the House.
Very good. Representative Ramon, you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, we stay focused on what we've been talking about this whole time. And I like each different person bringing their point. Secretary Geisenberg, obviously, we have to stop the bleeding. We understand that, as the way we're going to stop the bleeding is we have to modify the options. We understand that. You guys have done an amazing amount of work of different ways to look at this. But I think we have to set up, have three categories. We have to have the category for the to keeping our words for our retirees and creating options for them, a path forward that does that, which we've already committed to. We have to, create something that works with the current state employees, with maybe it's a combination of pay and options. I think that's what Mike Bagatta was trying to focus on. You know, this is a package, not just healthcare. And then on the newbies, everybody who's the new hire coming on, we have something clear and concise, and with their options that does not put us in an excessive environment of not funding the retirement options that we're giving to people on a ongoing basis. So I think that, you know, I hear the secretary saying the concerns, but we need to categorize who's going to pick up what to get where, you know, and who do we feel we have a commitment to that we should really not modify. And these options are great, but now we need a consolidation of this so we can actually put it together. And I don't think one option solves it for everyone, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative. Representative Ramon spared me at the Chinese American Festival from getting hit by a sword this weekend. We appreciate that with Paul. Right, Representative?
Yeah, actually, and the governor too. And, you know, I thought it would be a really odd headline stating that our lieutenant governor has now become the governor earlier than predicted, and why.
It was a very unique experience, but yeah, he was my bodyguard.
Yeah, the governor didn't think I was very funny, but everybody else did, so it was all good.
Bodyguard, you never know where people come into play. We have to, we will take this part out of the tape, please. Having said that, let's go to Secretary DeMatteis.
I just wanted to note, I put the median income information in the chat. It's about 51,144 compared to the average salary, which is 55,181.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Okay, any others? But thank you, Representative Ramon. On a serious note, appreciate that. I think that's what we're getting at our next meetings. Needing to really delve into whether it's categorization, as a representative stated, or if those categories just come naturally out of the sections of the modeling that we need to have completed. And then also, you know, again, reassuring current retirees that we have not made recommendations for any changes, and not to their advantage, say it every time. So if we could go around here, if there's any questions or comments, yes, Representative.
Just one comment, when we modeled the retirement date of 1/1/25, I just worry about unintended consequences of a rush to the exit. I think it was during the Castle administration, we offered an early retirement.
Yep.
And didn't really, I don't think we gained many savings, so we had an exit of a lot of.
I would disagree with that. We modeled that 2,500 people would leave, 5,000 people left.
Oh.
So double what we thought. And
For those
it
who
was-
couldn't hear it all, the complete thought was you had this modeling of retirees and then
so
back.
that caused a much bigger payout for sick leave, vacations. It was
Yeah.
double. And then there was significant savings, but then they filled all the positions.
Yeah, well, that was, we lost a lot of people with, we lost the knowledge base.
abilities, of course.
And, you know, I worry about it when we
Right.
begin to talk about retiring.
Versus
and
hiring.
people rushing to the exit,
Yeah.
because we saw that back in the day,
Yeah, we did lose a lot.
so.
All right, so noted. Mr. Wayne.
If we just look at page 10, and I realize that's an example only. And that gets us to 64.1%. Does that mean we're 36% away from where we want to be? Or is it, do we we need to get to 100%, or what number do we need to get to?
Mr.
Again,
Secretary.
in the Retirement Benefits Study Committee, I think what we voted on, I forget if we set the 30-year target at 85% or 80%. The funded ratio for the pension fund is currently what?
89%.
Is 89%. So we thought that over the 30-year period, shooting for something closer to what the pension fund ratio was made sense. But keep in mind, that's 30 years to get there. So it's a very slow walk.
Sure.
To get there.
But I hear you saying 80 or 85.
So I think if you shoot for 65, you're talking about now a 50-year walk or a 60-year walk. That's a long walk.
But a lot can happen in that time too. Both positive and negative. Thank you.
All right, questions from any other committee members, comments? We had the schedule there. We do meet again on July 10th. Again, our goal would be to be, very productive in July. And, if we have to add another meeting, we may have to do so as necessary. Go ahead.
Can I reinforce? It's very important for the committee to come to a consensus on the groups of models that they want us to have. If, like, on the July 10th meeting, if we can identify the combination of models we would like, and then we could present that on July 20th. So we really need decisions on the 10th. If we don't have decisions on July 10th, there's nothing we can model on July 20th.
Okay, and then from today, what direction do you need from us? I mean, I just gave you more work.
Obviously, we'll come back with your request as an option. But I just think it's really important for each of the committee members to kind of figure out what's important to them, for you as a committee to come together.
And you've heard special consideration, our safety officers, you've heard the concerns about retire versus hire date, we're hearing those concerns. And thinking along the lines of the general, assembly this week, hopefully, everything moves smoothly through. Representative, you'll find it very impressive that that piece of legislation in the Senate was placed on a consent agenda. Times have changed from when you were in the legislature, so.
They certainly have.
So anyway, having stated that, why don't we go to the public then?
Madam
Go ahead,
Chair,
Representative Wambach, I apologize.
I assumed that we were still on item 4 of the work plan for remaining meetings.
Yes.
My understanding is we've not gotten to item 5. Am I incorrect there?
Uh-oh, did I miss something? Probably, yes. I think we were doing kind of other business. Did you want to bring something up?
Well, and it may be that we don't have the time for it, but I had thought based on the last June meeting, the previous meeting, that we might have an opportunity to talk about some of the options and try to narrow the scope by having the subcommittee consider whether they wish to take some things off the table. Okay. Is that premature? Do we not have time today for that?
Probably, what I think is, if I look around, if I feel this room out, they're digesting things here. I don't know how people are there, unless there's something that's very obvious that you all want to make sure to vote on today, to have that option. I mean, I'm willing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call a question today.
Yeah.
I certainly have, an inclination to move in one direction or another,
Okay.
but it may be premature.
Premature, I think, Paul, but what we can then do, and I want to remind committee members, because we all know each other, and this is Delaware, we like to talk to each other. We are, a public body, so if we do, I recommend, that we're not emailing large emails, or, that we have to abide by the, FOIA standards. So if you have questions, though, I know Joanna and Faith will be back. So Paul, we're gonna take a little bit to digest that, and worst case scenario, we'll have to have another meeting at it in July.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will go to the public now. And
we did not have anybody pre-registered, and I don't see any members of the public in the room, so start with.
Okay, Senator Peterson.
I have to unmute her.
Wait a minute, we gotta get you unmuted. Wait a minute.
There we go, we should be okay.
Oh, you there, Senator?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, great. Madam Chair, members of the committee, all of the models shown in today's slides show an increase in premiums for those who retired after 2012. So roughly 35% of current retirees would seem to lose their 95% state share, which is specified in the Delaware Code. Is that really the intention of the subcommittee? Or are you planning to grandfather current retirees in to what they already have? None of the models talked about current Medicare eligible retirees. And I don't believe that the subcommittee has taken a position to grandfather in all current retirees with no change to the state share. But if you're talking about everybody who retired after 2012, that includes 35% of the current 30,000 retirees. Something else you would need to consider if in fact you're talking about including those people in the increase in premiums You need to consider the Delaware's Constitution that prohibits the state from reducing the emoluments of office for public officers. Many public officers retired from state service with a Medicare supplement plan with a 100% state share or a 95% state share. If this subcommittee were to recommend reducing the state share, there could be a problem with the emoluments clause in the Constitution. And finally, I just want to respond to an issue that Denise Allen raised a little bit earlier, and that is, are there plans out there similar to MedicFill? And I think Secretary DeMatti has said, no, you can never find another plan like MedicFill. Well, that's not exactly true. I found another plan just like MedicFill last year when I thought I was going to have to buy my own plan. And it was a Medicare Plan F, and it was identical to MedicFill, but it was a lot cheaper. I would have paid $152 a month in premiums for a Medicare Plan F. There's also, of course, Plan G, which is the same in terms of benefits, but with a small annual deductible. So there are plans out there that are identical to MedicFill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, and we'll move on. I know I don't usually comment, but since you were a senator and I was a senator with you, your first point was well taken. And I think if you look back at the slides, it says all current retirees after. So I don't think there was that intent with the other 5%, but we could talk later. But thank you for mentioning that. Perhaps it's how we have some things typed and written.
Next up is Joan Del Vittori, and I'm not sure if everyone can see the timer or not. We're having a little bit of difficulty, but we do have the timer starting.
Great.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jen.
I'd like to speak to the point that was made earlier about not describing the plan for current retirees as similar to what we have now. As a retired English professor, I'm sensitive to language that is open to a lot of interpretation. Quite recently, the governor had town halls in which he described Medicare Advantage as identical to what we have now. So I do take the point that we can't be very specific in describing what we want on the assumption that nothing is ever going to change. So right now, Medicare pays 80%, federal law could change, it could pay a different percent. Right now, Plan F is the best available Medigap, that could change. So we can't frame a recommendation in terms of the assumption that nothing's going to change, but I do think it has to be very clear that what we are talking about at a minimum could never be interpreted to mean Medicare Advantage. That what we are talking about is Medicare pays first, whatever the percent is that Medicare is paying. A private insurance company pays behind on terms that are similar to whatever are the best terms available on the open market for what we now call a Medigap plan. So I think it is important to nail it down, not only for now, but for the future, if this is meant to be in as something that would be relevant for years to come. Thank you.
Next up is Steve LePage.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I got about 3 points here to make. The 1.5% carve out is what I had mentioned before, and I think we're getting closer to that. I also mentioned a 1% payroll contribution, which I think that's being discussed now. I don't think that there's any need for eligibility changes, as there is very little to be gained from it. So it's pretty much a moot point. And then the plan choices with an increase in retiree percentage that they pay for future retirees, I think that's an option. But I also wanted to say that if there are choices, will the retiree be able to at some point drop MA, for instance, and go to a supplement plan without having to go through underwriting? So if you're going to offer the retirees choices, will they have an opportunity to go from MA to a supplement or from supplement to an MA plan? That's another thing to consider. Also, when we talked about the states, it was mentioned that their health payment was based upon a pension amount. Do each of those states also provide a yearly increase for the retirees? Because Delaware does not. So I believe I had sent around a spreadsheet with increases in pension tied to our healthcare premium payments. But that probably got lost in the mail somewhere, even though it was electronic. But I thought today's discussion was really good, and I think there's some other choices that I mentioned here that need to be discussed. But I think you guys are getting closer to a 1.5% carve out. That's just my opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. And we did get that, and it should be on the website. I know I'm not supposed to comment, but I can't help myself. I want you to know we're listening. I want the retirees to know we're really listening to all your feedback. All right.
Okay, next up is Diana Noonan. Diana?
Aye.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in my car, so let me know if you can hear me. Lieutenant Secretary Hall stated at the beginning of this meeting that she realizes that retirees are not in favor of the current Medicare Advantage plan. I guess I did not realize that this is the current plan. I thought this committee's purpose was to recommend a plan. I would think by this time the committee would be aware of the downfalls of Medicare Advantage. All over the country, states are reporting problems with coverages, prior authorizations, and coinsurance. Some are accusing Medicare Advantage plans of financial abuse. I think that by now we have successfully made you aware of the problems of this plan and what it would cause for Delaware's retirees. Medicare Advantage is not a plan that is equal in coverage to our current Medigap plan with Highmark. We have all said this over and over, but it bears repeating. Delaware's current retirees made an agreement with the state of Delaware over a period of decades to receive the current level of retirement medical coverage as part of our compensation. For you to take this promised medical coverage from us at this time in our lives when we desperately need the coverage is not just a breach of faith, it is unconscionable. Salaries were low, dedication was high, but our ability to save over 30 years was difficult. After 30 years of working for the state, my husband retired at about $60,000. Could you live on that? Could you put 3 kids through school and college and save a substantial amount for retirement? I doubt it. I would very much like to know what the state is considering for current retirees. Most meetings lately have focused on, for retirees, most meetings lately have focused on current and future employees. We have a right to know what is under consideration for us at this point. We deserve the right to respond to particulars before you make your recommendation. As for the state's financial shortfall, I continue to believe that is your problem. As an operations VP for 2 major banks, if I did not ensure that every budget line under my purview was funded, I would have been fired. A 1% state contribution is a bit of a slap in the face in my eyes. It is beyond my comprehension that you would unfund for 20 years and then lay the burden on the retired population. Also, in the more than 10 years I have been on Medicare with the current Medigap policy, everything has been covered and paid at 100% between the two. To state that you can never match Medicare coverages with Medigap is a falsehood. Medicare Advantage doesn't come close by thousands of dollars in liability to retirees. If your mandate is to get us a policy that is equal, it should be one without prior authorizations, co-pays, and the elusive coinsurance. Some members deem Medicare Advantage the right plan and are dedicated to it, but there are other plans and ways to do this, just as Mrs. Peterson just said. I beg you, please, grandfather the retirees. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. And I don't think you must have been in your car. I stated we are definitely hearing no Medicare Advantage and grandfathering for retirees. All right, next person.
Linda Hastings.
Oh.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate that you all in discussing the potential changes as you look forward. So many of you have said, but this won't apply to current retirees, and that you intend for us to be grandfathered in, meaning I believe that we will get Medicare Parts A and B and a supplement equivalent to what we have now in Part D. Thank you for understanding that that's what we want, for those of you who do. But here's the thing, you keep saying that, but you're not putting in writing what you actually mean by that. I think that's why you keep hearing the same language back from us, because you keep sort of vaguely saying it, but show us what you mean really, because the devil's in the details. We need to hear more than spoken words. It should be put in writing that could be put before the legislature and passed. I don't want to be in the position that we have to sue the state again in a couple of years because it wasn't made binding that what we are entitled to, we will continue to get. I don't want to get to the next SEBC group and they decide all of this current retirees, future retirees, trying to bid all that's too confusing, and they just decide to lump us all together again. You've got to put what you're saying to us, put in writing what you mean exactly, so that we can stop saying the same thing to you over and over again. So please craft that language, and thank you for what you're doing.
Okay, Bob Clarkin.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
I think when I put out my next record album, I'm going to call it "Can You Hear Me?" And I think a lot of people will understand where that's coming from. I was going to say I was disappointed that I didn't hear back from any of the committee members about the paper I sent to everybody about thinking about using the construct of the pension fund as a model for the OPEB fund. And I was really heartened at the end of your meeting when you used David Craig's expertise about the pension fund to start looking at some creative ways to reduce the OPEB liability. Because what you might be able to do, if you start looking about reducing that liability within 10 years, and you grow the assets in the OPEB fund at some point out there, and this would also need to be modeled, you then get interest on those funds, you get dividends on those funds, you get market changes on those funds because they're invested in stocks which go up every year. You could then, if you increase that 0.36%, which is an OEC cost, you may then be able to use the assets in the OPEB trust fund to reduce the 9.21%, which is the pay-go rate. So just think if you could increase that 0.36% up a little bit, or maybe quite a bit, you would then have earnings in that trust fund to reduce the 9.21%, which is also paid by agencies that run off of revenues. It also comes from ASF funds. It comes from federal funds. So increasing one might help you pay some of the pay-go costs, which would save the state, could save the state millions of dollars. And also, if I can say this really quickly, when we say similar to Medicare, I would just like you to define what a gap plan would be, that it would not have a deductible, Medicare doesn't, it would not have co-pays, Medicare doesn't, and it wouldn't have co-insurance. So you don't, if you put out an RFP, you wouldn't say similar to Medicare, you would just say, we would like a plan with no deductible, no co-pays, no co-insurance, because we as retirees know exactly what Medicare covers. So I wouldn't name it as Medicare, but I would say this is the kind of plan that we're looking for, and let proposers like Highmark and other proposers get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, Elisa Diller.
You gotta unmute her again. Lisa?
Oh, there we go.
Am I unmuted at this point?
Now you are.
Yeah, okay. Like Bob McClarkin, I'll do Can You Hear Me as my next album. I just have a question. There was a lot of good information put out this afternoon. My question is, if you're reducing, if you're at 64% with 1% contribution for the OPEB liability, what do you get if you put a 2% contribution in? Because that has been suggested several times. Now, I know that Representative Carson's bill is out of committee, but hasn't been voted on. That's the 1%, but I'm just curious about the 2%. Can somebody tell me how close you get with a 2% contribution?
It's on page 2, if you didn't see it.
I'm sorry, I have vision issues.
I know during public comment, we're not supposed to answer, but the chair will use her deference to allow us such to our councilwoman. You're asking me to read that number? I've got bad eyes too. Go, Joanne, you read that small number.
So with a 2% of funding,
she makes a living at reading.
That would reduce the liability, the unfunded liability by, or sorry, reduce the liability by $10.5 billion, and assuming the 0.36% of continued payroll plus 2%, that would take us to 93.2% funding in 30 years.
How interesting. That's the end of my comments. I'll leave you with that. 93%, way above 80 to 85. Thank you.
Okay, Dale Swain.
Yes, good afternoon. I really appreciate the comments made during the meeting and the presentations. It definitely seems to be taking us in the right direction. I did want to reiterate what Senator Peterson said in terms of making very clear what the retired after 2012 means to the current retirees so that it's not open for somebody else to interpret it later. It would be important also, as another person had addressed, to define whether an employee or retiree can change their plans after they select one to go from Medifil to Medicare Advantage or reverse on year 2, year 3, whatever. And also, as has been addressed by Lisa and some others, the funding at 1% would be phenomenal, but if we could get that to 1.5 or 1 3/4 or even 2, would definitely take care of all of the problems we have on our budget shortfall. So please consider that. And that's really all I have to say today. I appreciate what the committee's doing. Thank you.
Agree.
Thank you. Okay, Stephanie Smith.
They want to keep taking all that money out of the pot. How do you pay me?
Stephanie. Anyone mute?
Okay, you can hear me now, I think, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I've been trying to follow along and admit I did not take screenshots of everything I should have. I was sitting here thinking that this wasn't going to affect current retirees. And then all of a sudden I realized many of your models are based on changes to people who retire after 2012. And that certainly includes me, who retired in 2015. So if these aren't meant to affect those of us who retired after 2012 with 36 years of service? I would really like to know that. And I think a lot of my friends who are very concerned about this would like to know that too. Thank you.
Let's dispel that.
Yeah, we need to dispel that and a few things, and I'm sorry, I wish we were all in a great big room together. So that is not, Joanna, I don't know if you put the slides together, maybe there's some of the languaging, would you like to comment? Slide 9 might confuse you.
So I can assure you, none of these models have been modeled with anything other than hired as of 1/1/2015, hired as of 1/1/2025, or retired as of 1/1/25. I think what may be causing the confusion is slide 9, which the very first bullet under option description says all current retirees after 1/1/2012 who are 65 years of age. Right now, they pay 5% state share or 5% of the cost share, and they will continue to pay the cost share. That is the sole purpose of that bullet, is to maintain consistency, and I fear that now it's confusing our membership, so that is not the intent. Again, if you look at the other consideration, it says Model C, and it's for this particular example, it's only Model C. And it's a retirement on or after 1/1/2025.
So again, I broke rules, but I am the chair and I have the right to do so. Normally during public comment, we don't comment back, but you all are part of this. Senate Bill 29 made it that this was a conversation with and through retirees. So if I can make it clear again, the things we've agreed on was the 1%, which is moving through, and that our plan options, and again, SEBC separate committee, but this committee had made an agreement, we are not impacting current retirees on any of these plans, and that was including the Medicare Advantage not. So again, I know people want some of this in writing. We're not yet to the point to have things in writing because we're just coming forward with modeling. So I just want to reiterate that, and I'm sorry if there was confusion. So I broke the rules. Normally you don't do this during public comment, but we are a task force, so it's the only place I can break the rules. I don't get to do it at home with the men, so I'm doing it today. I broke the rules, sorry. So if we go to other meetings, you will probably not have this happen with the chair. They will probably not do this. All right.
Don't have anybody else.
Nobody else?
2
Okay.
minutes left, if she wanted to.
Did you want to say anything else, Ms. Smith? We all got excited and answered your question. Ms. Smith, did you have anything else? We got excited and answered your question. Do you have
You
anything?
explained it, yes,
You
and
sure?
and when the time is right, I would love to see that maybe reworked a little, that wording, because I don't think that was the only slide, but I could be wrong. I don't have that in front of me now.
All right, so I hope you feel better after hearing that. Not the intent, but thank you. Sometimes words on paper and unspoken are different. All right, anything else? So we are gonna have our next meeting, Kristen, and Faith will return.
I don't think Faith will be at the next.
Oh, she won't either.
No, we have to manage without her.
We've
for
moved her,
one
we
more.
rushed her along.
Who approves her leave?
I know. All right, so next meeting
The
is
next
July
meeting is
10th.
July 10th let me make sure, at 12 o'clock.
Okay, very good. Hearing no other comments, the meeting of the Retiree Health Benefits Advisory Subcommittee is adjourned. Do I have a motion and a
So
second?
moved. Second.
I just adjourned us. All right, we have a motion and a second. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Are we off?